Welcome to my channel, my friends. Tell me honestly, do you ever feel scared to speak English even when you know the words? Do your hands shake, your voice disappears, and your mind go blank? I know that fear. I lived with it for years. But one day, something changed. I found a way to speak English without fear. Stay with me till the end, because today I'll tell you how I did it, and how you can too. Comment below if you've ever felt afraid to speak English. Chapter 1. The Fear That Stopped My Words. I still remember the first time someone asked me a question in English. It was a simple question. What is your name? But my heart started beating so fast that I couldn't even breathe. My hands felt cold, my mouth opened, but no sound came out. I knew the answer. I had practiced that sentence many times in my mind. But in that moment, fear was louder than my words. I just smiled nervously and stayed quiet. Everyone laughed softly, and I wished I could disappear. That was the moment I realized I wasn't afraid of English. I was afraid of people hearing my mistakes. Every time I tried to speak, the same thing happened. My thoughts raced in English, but my tongue refused to move. I felt like I was trapped inside my own silence. I would hear my classmates talking confidently, saying full sentences with smiles, while I only repeated the words in my head. I felt small. I felt stupid. I felt like my brain was locked, and English was the key I didn't have. I used to sit in English class and avoid eye contact with the teacher. When she asked a question, I looked down, hoping she wouldn't call my name. My body wanted to disappear. I feared the sound of my own voice. I knew if I spoke, everyone would notice my accent, my mistakes, my pauses. The fear wasn't just in my mind. It was in my body. My shoulders tensed. My stomach hurt. My voice broke. I wanted to speak, but fear was the wall standing between me and the world. At home, I practiced quietly. I whispered English words when nobody was around. I said, "Apple book teacher. Thank you." But when it came to real people, I couldn't say anything. I felt like there were two versions of me, the confident one in my room and the silent one in front of others. I used to ask myself, why am I like this? Why can't I just speak like them? I thought maybe something was wrong with me. But later I learned something powerful. Almost every English learner feels this fear. I was not alone. Fear of speaking English is not about the language. It's about the feeling of being judged. It's about remembering that one time you said something wrong and people laughed. It's about comparing yourself to others who seem better. It's about thinking you are not enough. That fear grows inside you like a shadow. You want to speak, but the moment you try, that shadow pulls you back. You tell yourself next time, but next time never comes. I used to blame my English. I told myself, if I learn more grammar, I'll be confident. If I memorize more words, I'll speak better. But I was wrong. I realized the problem wasn't my English. It was my fear. I was waiting to be perfect before I spoke. But perfection never comes first. Speaking does. I had built a cage around myself made of self-doubt and overthinking. Every time I opened my mouth, the cage became tighter. I forgot that speaking is supposed to be free. It's supposed to be fun. Sometimes even simple situations felt like battles. Ordering food, asking for directions, talking to classmates. I avoided all of them. My silence became a habit. People started thinking I didn't care or didn't want to talk, but inside, I was screaming for a voice. I wanted to say so much. But fear had stolen my words. I remember one day walking home and thinking, if I keep living like this, I'll never be able to express who I am. That thought broke me inside because I had ideas, feelings, and dreams, but no words to share them. At night, I would replay all my mistakes in my head. That one wrong pronunciation, that one grammar error. I couldn't stop thinking about them, but nobody else remembered those things. Only I did. That's how fear works. It repeats old failures until you believe they will happen again. I didn't realize then that people were too busy worrying about their own mistakes. Nobody was really judging me. I was the one judging myself. As days passed, I noticed something. Every time I faced fear and stayed silent, it became stronger. Every time I spoke, even a few words, it became weaker. It was like fighting a giant with small stones. One word was one stone. I didn't need to defeat the giant in one day. I just needed to keep throwing. Fear loses power when you take action, even if your voice shakes. That was a lesson I didn't know yet, but it was waiting for me. That fear taught me something important about life, too. The things we are most afraid of are usually the things that will change us the most.
Speaking English was not just about learning words, it was about finding courage. Every language learner has two battles, one with vocabulary and one with fear. The first one is easy to win, the second one takes heart, and I was ready to fight it. But before I found courage, I had to hit my lowest point. A day came when fear made me lose a big opportunity, and that day changed everything for me. I'll tell you about that in the next chapter, where silence turned into a decision that changed my life forever. Chapter 2: The Day I Got Tired of Being Silent. There comes a moment in everyone's life when silence becomes heavier than fear. For me, that moment came one afternoon at school. I still remember it clearly. The classroom was full of noise, students chatting, the teacher writing something on the board. Then she turned and asked a question, a simple one. I knew the answer. My heart started to beat faster. I looked around. Nobody was raising their hand. I wanted to. I could almost hear the words in my mind, but when I tried to speak, that same fear returned. My lips didn't move. Someone else raised their hand, said the same answer I had in my head, and the teacher smiled. Good job. Everyone clapped, and I just sat there, invisible again. That day, something inside me broke. I walked home quietly, but my mind was loud. I kept thinking, I knew the answer, why didn't I speak? It wasn't that I didn't know English, it was that I didn't trust myself. I realized something painful. I wasn't losing to the language, I was losing to my own fear. I was tired of watching others speak confidently, while I stayed silent, afraid of judgment that never even came. That silence started to hurt more than my mistakes ever could. When I got home, I went straight to my room and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked tired, sad, small. I whispered, "Why are you afraid?" No answer came, only my own eyes looking back at me, full of questions. I sat there for a long time, thinking about my fear, how it had controlled me, how it made me miss chances, how it made me smaller every day. I thought about all the times I wanted to order food in English, all the times I wanted to join a conversation but didn't. The fear had stolen too much from me. That day, I made a quiet promise to myself: no more. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling, not confidence, not excitement, but determination. I told myself, even if I make mistakes, I will speak. I didn't know how to stop being afraid, but I knew I had to start doing the opposite of what fear told me to do. Fear told me to stay quiet. I decided to talk. Fear told me to hide. I decided to try. I understood that courage doesn't mean not feeling fear. Courage means acting even when fear is still there. Later that week, I saw an opportunity to test my promise. My teacher asked the class to introduce themselves in English. Usually, I would look down, pretend to be busy, or hope time ran out before it reached me. But this time, I didn't run. When it was my turn, my heart started racing again. My throat felt dry. For a second, I wanted to give up. But then I remembered the promise I made in front of the mirror. I stood up slowly and said, "My name is Adam." My voice was shaking. I paused for a moment. The whole class looked at me. Fear whispered, "Sit down." But I continued. I like to learn English. My grammar wasn't perfect. My pronunciation was not clear. But I finished, and when I sat down, I felt something new. Relief. Nobody laughed. The teacher smiled. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it became smaller. That one sentence was a victory. That small success gave me hope. It made me realize that fear doesn't vanish in one day. You have to break it piece by piece. Every time you speak, you take back a little power. Every time you try, your voice becomes stronger. The problem is that most learners wait for the fear to disappear before they start speaking. But it's the opposite. You speak through fear, not after it's gone. That's the secret. That day, I began to change my idea of learning English. Before, I thought learning meant studying books, memorizing grammar, writing notes. But that day taught me that true learning begins when you start using what you already know, even if it's just one word, even if it's broken. Real learning happens when you stop waiting to be perfect and start being brave. I realized that English wasn't my enemy. Fear was. When I got home, I smiled at myself in the mirror again. "You did it," I said softly. It was only 2 sentences, but for me, it felt like climbing a mountain. I was proud, not because I spoke perfect English, but because I didn't let fear stop me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that moment in my head, my trembling voice, my teacher's smile, that small burst of courage. It was a spark, and I knew I needed to protect it. I didn't want to go back to silence again. The next day, I practiced again, this time alone. I said simple sentences out loud. "How are you?" "I'm fine." "What is your name?" Each word gave me a little more strength. I began to feel free, not fluent yet, but free. And freedom felt better than perfection. That was the day I truly began my journey, the day I got tired of being silent. Fear didn't leave me overnight, but I stopped listening to it. I started choosing my voice over my fear, and that one decision changed everything about my English journey. Because once you decide to speak, the world starts listening. And that small decision led me to my next big step, the first real sentence of courage I ever spoke, a sentence that changed my life. I'll tell you that story in the next chapter. Chapter 3: My First Sentence of Courage. It happened on an ordinary morning. Nothing special about that day. The sky looked the same. My walk to school felt the same. Even the classroom looked the same. But inside me, something was different. I was carrying a small spark, the promise I made to myself that I would not let fear silence me anymore. I didn't know how or when, but I was ready to speak. During break time, a classmate came to me and said, "Can you help me with math?" He said it in English. My heart stopped for a moment. Normally, I would have smiled awkwardly and said nothing. But this time, my heart said, "Speak." I took a deep breath and whispered, "Yes, I can help." The words were simple. My voice trembled, but they came out, real, alive, and mine. My friend smiled and said, "Thank you." That was it. Just 4 words. Yes, I can help. But those 4 words broke a wall that had trapped me for years. I remember walking home that day feeling light, like I had finally opened a locked door. I kept repeating those words in my head, again and again, smiling every time. Yes, I can help. It was my first real sentence of courage. That moment taught me something powerful. Courage doesn't start with big speeches. It starts with small, simple sentences. It starts when you stop worrying about how perfect your English sounds and start focusing on what you want to say. I realized that my biggest problem wasn't grammar or pronunciation. It was hesitation. I had spent years preparing words in my mind that never reached my mouth. But now, I had broken that barrier, and I wanted to keep going. At home, I practiced speaking out loud. I would look around and talk to objects. "This is my book. I like my room. I am learning English." It sounded silly at first, but it worked. Every word I spoke made my fear weaker. Every sentence I finished made me stronger. The more I practiced, the more my confidence grew. The next day at school, the teacher asked everyone to tell one thing they liked doing in their free time, in English. My heartbeat quickened again. The old fear tried to return, whispering, "Stay quiet." But I ignored it. I raised my hand. The teacher looked surprised. "Yes, Adam," she said. My voice shook a little, but I said, "I like reading books." The class went quiet for a second, then the teacher smiled. "Very good, she said. My friends clapped. That was the first time I spoke in front of everyone. It wasn't perfect. My accent was strong. My voice was nervous. But nobody laughed. Instead, I felt something new: respect. People were proud of me, and more importantly, I was proud of myself. When I got home that day, I couldn't stop smiling. My parents noticed it too. "What happened?" my father asked. I told him. I spoke English in front of the whole class. He looked at me with surprise and pride. "See, you can do it," he said. Those words felt like a warm light in my chest. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Today I spoke." I was afraid, but I did it anyway. That simple line became the beginning of a new chapter in my life. From that day, I promised myself to speak at least one English sentence every day, no matter what. It didn't have to be long or perfect, just one sentence to prove that I was still trying. Sometimes it was easy, sometimes not. There were days I spoke confidently, and days I stumbled over my words. But I kept going. Because every time I spoke, fear lost a little more power. Speaking was no longer something to be afraid of, it was something to be proud of. One afternoon, while walking back home, I met a tourist who looked lost. He showed me his phone and said, "Do you know this place?" I hesitated for a moment, but then smiled and replied, "Yes, go straight and turn left." He thanked me, and I felt this wave of joy. I had just helped a stranger, in English. That's when I realized something beautiful. English wasn't just a subject anymore. It was a bridge. A bridge between me and the world. The fear that once locked my mouth was slowly turning into motivation. I started seeing English not as a scary language, but as a friend. A friend who was waiting for me to speak. I stopped worrying about mistakes. If I said something wrong, I laughed and tried again. And guess what? Nobody cared about my mistakes as much as I thought. That's the day I understood. Courage grows when you use it. The more you speak, the stronger your voice becomes. You don't wake up fearless one morning. You build fearlessness word by word, sentence by sentence. That first small sentence, "Yes, I can help," became the seed of my confidence. It showed me that fear cannot stop you if you take action. Because once you speak, even a little, you start to change the story you tell yourself. And I was ready to change mine. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how I found my best speaking partner. Not a friend, not a teacher, but something very unexpected. A mirror that became my biggest teacher and my closest friend in learning English without fear. Chapter 4. The mirror became my friend. It started one quiet evening. I was sitting in my room after dinner, feeling a bit lonely but also proud of myself. I had spoken a few English sentences that day at school, and though they were short, they felt like tiny victories. I wanted to keep improving, but I didn't know how. My friends weren't always free to talk, and I was still shy around other people. Then my eyes landed on the mirror across my room. I don't know why, but I stood up, walked to it, and looked at myself. For a long time, I just stared at my face, my eyes, my nervous smile. And then I whispered softly, "Hello." It sounded strange, but it was the start of something beautiful. At first, I laughed. Talking to a mirror felt silly, but I remembered something my teacher once said. You are your first audience. So I tried again. I looked at my reflection and said, "My name is Adam. I am learning English." The boy in the mirror said it back. It felt strange, but good, like I was finally listening to my own voice in English. I practiced that same line again and again. My name is Adam. I am learning English. Every time I repeated it, my voice became a little stronger, my pronunciation a little clearer. The mirror didn't laugh. It didn't correct me harshly. It didn't compare me to anyone else. It just stood there, patient and kind. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of being judged. I could make mistakes freely because no one was watching. The mirror became my safe place, a classroom where I was both the student and the teacher. I started doing this every day. Each morning before school, I stood in front of the mirror and talked. Some days, I practiced introductions. "Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you." Other days, I talked about my feelings. "I feel tired." "I am happy today." I didn't care if the sentences were simple. What mattered was that I was speaking. Slowly, I began to notice changes. My voice was no longer quiet. my words flowed more naturally. And most importantly, my fear started to fade. One morning, I tried something new. Instead of short sentences, I told my reflection a small story. Today, I will go to school. I will meet my friends. I will learn English. I smiled at myself as I spoke. It felt real. It felt powerful. For the first time, I believed the words I was saying. I wasn't just practicing English, I was practicing confidence. Sometimes, I would even pretend that my reflection was another person. I asked questions and answered them. What is your favorite food? My favorite food is rice. What do you like to do? I like reading books. It was like having a conversation with myself, and with every practice, I felt more comfortable using English. I didn't wait for others to talk to me. I created my own speaking world. The mirror also taught me something deeper: to love my mistakes. When I said something wrong, I didn't feel embarrassed. I corrected myself and smiled. I began to realize that mistakes are just part of learning. The boy in the mirror was no longer my critic. He was my friend, cheering me on every day. One evening, after a long day, I stood in front of the mirror and said something new. I am not afraid to speak English anymore. I repeated it again and again. Each time, I believed it more. The reflection in the mirror smiled back at me. I knew something inside me had changed. My fear was still there, but it had become smaller than my courage. This daily habit became my secret weapon. Whenever I felt nervous before speaking in front of others, I practiced first with a mirror. It gave me strength. It helped me see that the person I feared most, the one who doubted me, was me. Once I learned to face myself, no one else could scare me. After a few weeks of mirror practice, people at school started to notice the change. My classmates said, "Your English sounds better." My teacher said, "You speak more confidently now." They didn't know my secret. They didn't know that every night, I had been training with my reflection, turning fear into friendship. The mirror taught me one of the greatest lessons of my life. Confidence is built in private before it's seen in public. The world sees your results, but not your practice. Behind every fluent speaker is someone who practiced alone when nobody was watching. If you're watching this right now, and you feel afraid to speak, I want you to try this. Go stand in front of your mirror tonight. Look at yourself. Smile. And just say one sentence in English, even a simple one. My name is Adam. I am learning English. Say it softly at first, then louder, then again. Do it every day. You'll be amazed at how fast your fear begins to fade. Because that's what happened to me. The mirror helped me discover my own voice, a voice that I had been hiding for too long. And once I began to love speaking, I also began to love my mistakes. That realization changed everything. Because the next chapter of my journey was all about mistakes, how I made them, how they helped me, and how they became the real teachers behind my fluency. Chapter 5: The Power of Mistakes. I used to think mistakes were the worst thing that could happen. Whenever I said something wrong, I would feel ashamed. If someone corrected me, my face would turn red. Sometimes, I wanted to stop learning completely. I thought mistakes meant failure, but one day, something changed. I learned that mistakes were not my enemy, they were my best teacher. It happened when I was talking to a friend at school. I wanted to say, I am hungry, but instead I said, I am angry. My friend laughed so hard, I felt embarrassed, but then he explained the difference. We laughed together. That small mistake helped me remember those words forever. Hungry and angry became my favorite pair of words because they taught me a simple truth. When you laugh at your mistakes, they lose their power. From that day, I decided to stop hiding from my errors. I began to see every mistake as a lesson in disguise. When I said something wrong, I didn't say, "Oh no, I'm terrible." Instead, I said, "Thank you. I just learned something new." And that change of attitude made learning faster and happier. Every wrong word became a stepping stone to the right one. I also started noticing that even fluent speakers make mistakes. My teacher once said, "Nobody speaks perfectly, not even native speakers." She told us that confidence is not about speaking without mistakes. It's about speaking despite them. That sentence changed everything for me. I realized that the people who speak fluently are not perfect. They are just brave. They don't stop when they make a mistake, they keep going. At home, I practiced speaking every day. Sometimes I recorded my voice. When I listened, I found small errors, wrong pronunciation, missing words, strange pauses. Instead of feeling bad, I smiled. Those mistakes showed that I was growing. A baby falls hundreds of times before it learns to walk. Nobody laughs at a baby for falling. We cheer because the baby is trying. Learning English is the same. Every mistake is a sign that you're moving forward. One evening, I was watching an English movie with subtitles. I tried to repeat the lines. Sometimes I mispronounced the words, sometimes I forgot them. But I kept going. When I got one line right, I felt proud. That's when I realized something important. Perfection is not the goal. Progress is. Every time you speak, even with mistakes, you are one step closer to fluency. But if you stay silent, you take no steps at all. I also started writing in English every night. At first, I made so many grammar errors. I used is instead of are, and sometimes I forgot the right tense. But instead of feeling bad, I corrected them. I used my mistakes as my study plan. If I kept writing I am agree, I learned the correct form I agree. My notebook became full of lessons my teachers never taught me, lessons my mistakes gave me. Sometimes, I made the same mistake again and again. That's when I realized that learning takes patience. You can't force your brain to change overnight. It learns by repetition. So I learned to forgive myself. I told myself, it's okay, I'll get it right next time. And slowly, next time came. My words became smoother, my sentences longer, my confidence stronger. One of the biggest lessons I learned was this: when you make mistakes in front of others, you teach them something too. I once mispronounced a word during a group discussion. Instead of laughing, my friends corrected me kindly. Later they said, "You give us courage to speak too." That day, I realized my mistakes didn't make me weak. They made me real. They made me human. And humans learn by trying. Mistakes also helped me understand people better. When I stopped judging myself, I stopped judging others. I became kinder, not just to myself but to everyone who was learning. We were all on the same road, walking at different speeds, but going in the same direction. That thought gave me peace. It made English feel less like a competition and more like a journey. The more mistakes I made, the less afraid I became. Fear and mistakes cannot live together. When you welcome mistakes, fear has no space to stay. Slowly, my fear faded because I no longer needed to be perfect. I just needed to be honest. Honest with my effort, my progress, and my voice. Now when I speak English, I still make mistakes. But I don't care. I smile and continue, because mistakes are part of every beautiful story. They are the bridges between where you are and where you want to be. Every wrong word you say brings you one step closer to speaking right. Every moment of confusion brings clarity tomorrow. And that's the power of mistakes. They don't stop you, they shape you. They build your strength, your courage, and your fluency. So don't run from them, run with them. Because after I learned to love my mistakes, something amazing happened. My confidence started speaking for me. My English voice became free. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how confidence began to take over, how it replaced fear, and how it became my new language. Chapter 6: When Confidence Finally Spoke for Me. Confidence didn't come to me suddenly. It didn't appear like magic. It came slowly, step by step, like the morning sun rising after a long night. For years, fear had been my only voice. But now, something inside me was changing. I was no longer afraid of making mistakes. I wasn't trying to be perfect anymore. I just wanted to express myself. That small shift turned into power. I started noticing it in small ways. When someone spoke English around me, I didn't freeze anymore. I listened. I tried to understand. And sometimes, I even replied. At first, my voice was soft and uncertain, but it was there. I remember one day, my teacher asked the class, "Who wants to read this paragraph aloud?" I raised my hand without even thinking. The moment I did, I surprised myself. My heart raced, but I stood up. I started reading slowly, carefully, one word at a time. My pronunciation wasn't perfect, but it was mine. When I finished, the teacher smiled and said, "Good job, Adam." That smile felt like sunlight on my heart. From that day, something new began. I realized confidence is not something you wait for, it's something you build. And the way to build it is by doing the very thing that scares you. Each time I spoke, my voice grew stronger. Each time I practiced, my fear grew weaker. At home, I still practiced in front of the mirror, but now, I added more emotion. I didn't just speak words, I spoke feelings. I practiced real-life sentences like, "Excuse me, can you help me?" Or, "I'm learning English." I smiled while saying them, because I wanted to train my body to feel relaxed. I realized confidence is not only in your mind, it's in your posture, your smile, your eyes. The way you hold yourself tells your brain, I can do this. Sometimes, I would record myself speaking. When I listened, I could hear how my English had changed. My voice was clearer, my sentences smoother. I started to sound like someone who believed in himself. That was a huge moment for me. I wasn't just learning English anymore, I was becoming confident in who I was. Confidence also changed how people treated me. When I spoke, they listened differently. Before, they used to complete my sentences or ignore my mistakes. Now, they waited patiently, interested in what I had to say. That's when I understood something beautiful. When you respect your own voice, others begin to respect it too. There was a day I'll never forget. I went to a small shop near my house. The shopkeeper spoke English and asked, "How are you?" Usually, I would just smile or say fine quietly. But that day, I smiled back and said, "I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" He laughed and said, "I'm good, young man. Adam?" It was such a small exchange, ainly, but I walked home feeling 10 feet taller. It wasn't about vocabulary or grammar. It was about connection. Confidence had turned English into something alive. Of course, not every day was perfect. Sometimes I forgot words. Sometimes I spoke too fast and got stuck. But I didn't let those moments define me anymore. I learned to laugh at myself. I would say, "Oops, let me try again." And that small laugh would break the tension. I discovered that people don't care if your English is perfect. They care if you're real, if you're trying. Confidence also gave me something more precious than words. It gave me freedom. I could finally express my ideas, my feelings, my personality. I could tell stories, ask questions, even make jokes. I began to feel like myself in English. That feeling is something every learner dreams of. The moment you stop translating from your language and start thinking in English. That's when I knew I had truly changed. One evening, I looked back at my journey. I remembered the boy who stayed silent, afraid to speak. The boy who hid behind fear. Now, that same boy was talking to people, reading out loud, watching English movies, and even teaching his younger brother simple sentences. I smiled because I knew the fear was gone, and confidence had taken its place. But confidence doesn't mean the journey ends. It means the journey becomes more exciting. Now I wanted to help others. I wanted to tell everyone who was afraid, Sebel. You can do this too, because confidence isn't a gift you're born with. It's something you grow, little by little, every time you speak, every time you try. That's why, in my next chapter, I'll share how I didn't do it alone. Because confidence also grows when you have people who believe in you, friends, teachers, or even strangers who give you a little push when you need it most. In the next part, I'll tell you about the people who helped me speak without fear and how they became the wind behind my words. Chapter 7: The People Who Helped Me Speak Without Fear. For a long time, I thought learning English was something I had to do alone. I believed no one could understand how scared I felt inside. But I was wrong. I discovered that courage grows faster when you're not walking alone. There were people in my life, teachers, friends, and even strangers, who helped me speak without fear. They didn't give me perfect grammar lessons or expensive books. They gave me something much more powerful: encouragement. It started with my English teacher. She was kind and patient, and she never laughed when I made mistakes. In fact, she smiled every time I tried. Once, I said, "She go to school every day," and then realized it should be "she goes." I corrected myself quickly, expecting her to frown, but instead, she said, "Good, you found your mistake yourself." That small praise made me feel 10 times braver. From that moment, I stopped seeing my teacher as a judge and started seeing her as a guide. She taught me that teachers are not there to test you, they're there to walk beside you. Then there were my friends. They spoke English better than I did, and before, that made me shy. But as I gained confidence, I started to see them differently. One afternoon during break time, my friend Sarah said, "Let's practice English together. You help me with grammar, and I'll help you with speaking." That was the best deal I ever made. We started small, short conversations about food, school, movies. We made mistakes, laughed, corrected each other, and tried again. Every word we exchanged made English feel less like a subject and more like a friendship. Sometimes we would even challenge each other. "Let's only speak English during lunch today, Adam," she'd say. At first, it was hard. We mixed words from our language, laughed, and gave up halfway. But each day, we lasted longer. By the end of a few weeks, speaking English felt normal. It didn't feel like a performance anymore, it felt like play. My friends didn't just correct my sentences, they corrected my thinking. Once, when I said, "I'm afraid people will laugh at my accent," one of them said something I'll never forget. "Adam, your accent is not a mistake, it's your story." That line touched my heart. From that day, I stopped trying to sound like someone else. My accent became a part of me, not something to hide. I realized that English is not about sounding perfect, it's about being understood and being real. Another person who helped me was a stranger I met online. I joined a language exchange website. He wanted to learn my language, and I wanted to learn English. We talked through voice calls once a week. The first time, I was so nervous I could barely say hello, but he was kind. Whenever I made a mistake, he didn't correct me with frustration. He repeated my sentence the right way and asked me to say it again. Slowly, I started to relax. We talked about daily life, culture, dreams, and sometimes even our fears. He once told me, "We are both learners. There's no need to be perfect, just be brave." Those words gave me strength. Over time, I learned that confidence doesn't only come from inside you. It also comes from people who remind you that you can do it. When you're surrounded by kindness, your fear has nowhere to hide. That's why I always tell English learners, find your people. Find someone who listens, who encourages, who doesn't laugh when you speak. Even one good listener can change your journey completely. One day, something beautiful happened. My teacher asked me to help another student who was struggling with speaking, just like I once did. I felt nervous but agreed. When I sat with that student, I saw my old self in his eyes, shy, scared, quiet. I smiled and said, "It's okay, just say one sentence." He said, "My name is Rafi." I clapped softly and said, "Perfect." He smiled. That was the moment I realized the best way to overcome fear is to help someone else overcome theirs. Teaching someone made me even more confident, because when you give courage, you receive it too. Now I understood something very important. Learning English is not a lonely road, it's a shared journey. Every person who encourages you, listens to you, or even corrects you kindly is helping you grow. You don't need to find hundreds of people, even one is enough. Because sometimes one voice saying, "You can do it," is louder than 100 fears telling you that you can't. When I look back now, I see how each person I met added a piece to my confidence. My teacher gave me patience. My friends gave me laughter. My online partner gave me understanding. Together, they built a bridge that led me from fear to freedom. And one day, I stood on the other side of that bridge, not afraid anymore. I could speak freely, share my thoughts, and express who I really was. I realized that English was never about words. It was about connection, heart to heart, person to person. But there was still one final step in my journey. Confidence had changed my voice. Now it was time to change my life. In the last chapter, I'll tell you what it felt like to finally be free, to speak English without fear, and to help others do the same. Chapter 8: My English Voice, Free at Last. It's strange how something that once terrified me became something that now feels like home. I still remember the boy who couldn't say his name out loud, the one who stayed silent in class, afraid that people would laugh at his English. But now, when I think of him, I smile, because that same boy found his voice. And not just any voice, a voice that speaks with courage, with joy, and with freedom. It didn't happen in one day. It was the result of hundreds of small moments, one mistake corrected, one sentence spoken, one fear faced. Step by step, my voice began to grow stronger. I still remember the first time I realized I was no longer afraid. It was at a school event where we had to introduce ourselves in front of everyone. A few years ago, that kind of moment would have made me want to hide behind someone. But this time, I walked to the microphone calmly, smiled at the audience, and said, "Hello, my name is Adam. I want to share my English journey with you." The words came out smooth, clear, and full of life. I could feel my heart beating, but it was no longer fear, it was excitement. For the first time, I was not thinking about grammar or pronunciation. I was simply sharing my truth. The people listening were smiling, not because I spoke perfect English, but because they could feel my confidence. That was the moment I understood what fluency really means. It's not about speaking like a native speaker, it's about speaking without fear. When I stepped off the stage, my teacher hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." I smiled and replied, "I'm proud of me too." Those words had power. Because for so long, I had wanted someone else's approval. My classmates, my teachers, even strangers. But at that moment I realized the most important approval was my own. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. I had already won, not against anyone else, but against the fear that once controlled me. After that, English stopped being a school subject and became a part of my life. I started watching English videos and actually understanding them. I talked to new people confidently. I even began helping others learn English. When my younger cousin said, "I'm scared to speak," I smiled and told him, "I used to be scared too. But you don't have to wait to be perfect. Just start speaking now." His eyes lit up, just like mine once did. That's when I realized the voice I had built wasn't just for me, it was for others too. Speaking English without fear changed more than just my communication, it changed who I was as a person. I became braver, more open, more curious about the world. English became a window through which I could see new ideas, meet new people, and explore new dreams. I watched documentaries, read short books, joined online conversations, and I realized something magical. Every time I spoke English, I wasn't just using another language, I was using another version of myself, a more confident one. Sometimes, people ask me, "Adam, how did you stop being afraid?" I always tell them the same thing. I didn't stop being afraid, I just started speaking anyway. The fear never truly disappears. Even now, sometimes before speaking to a new person, I feel a little nervous. But now, that nervousness feels like energy. It reminds me that I care. Fear doesn't have to stop you. It can push you forward if you let it. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to know something important. Your English doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. Your words matter. Your voice matters. You have something to say that no one else in the world can say the same way. Don't let fear steal that from you. Speak with your heart, even if your grammar isn't perfect. Confidence is not speaking without mistakes, it's speaking through them. Now, when I talk in English, I don't think about what others might say. I think about what I want to share. I tell stories, express my thoughts, and connect with people from all over the world. The same language that once made me feel small now makes me feel free. I can express my emotions, my dreams, my truth, and that freedom is priceless. Learning English taught me much more than words. It taught me patience, courage, and the beauty of progress. It showed me that even the smallest voice can grow into something powerful if you give it time. It showed me that you can't wait for fear to leave. You must walk through it, step by step, until fear becomes your friend. Now, every time I look at my reflection in the mirror, I remember that shy boy who once whispered, "My name is Adam," and I smile at him. Because he didn't give up, he kept practicing, even when nobody was watching. He turned his fear into fuel. He found his English voice. And now, so can you. If you've been afraid to speak, if your voice has been hiding behind fear, I want you to promise yourself something today. You will speak anyway. Even if it's just one word, one sentence, one try. Don't wait for confidence, build it by speaking. Don't wait to feel ready. Start now, even if you're scared. Because courage doesn't come before speaking, it comes after. So take this as your moment. Speak today. Speak tomorrow. Speak until English feels like a friend sitting beside you. I did it, and if I did, so can you. If this story touched your heart, I want you to take one simple step today. Go to the comments and write, "I will speak without fear." Let's make that promise together. Then, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who is afraid to speak. Remember, your voice deserves to be heard. I believe in you. Now, it's time for you to believe in yourself.